Sister Anne-Marie, and how many of you have heard of Bartolo Longo? Okay, there's a good chance you know more than me. He's a new saint to me, and he's a new saint to the church. Pope Leo, in fact, canonized him. Yeah, so he's a recent figure, and I had never really heard of him. Maybe I heard of him because I had read John Paul's writings. And St. John Paul II knew of him and had read his writings and integrated his writings into his own writings. So I had read a lot of John Paul II, and so had read the writings of John Paul, and therefore some of the quotes of Bartolo Longo. But I was asked by some friends to organize a pilgrimage to Pompeii, which Our Lady of Pompeii is the shrine that Bartolo Longo established, which I had no idea about. And so then we went there, and we also went to his home village, Latiano, and kind of the southern part of Italy, and were able to kind of get to know him a little bit. And was very blessed by a great spirit of hospitality at the shrine. The first night we got there, we were traveling, and as you can imagine, jet lag and everything like that, and this very, very kind man was there speaking to me in Italian, and I was trying to translate after staying awake for 25 hours. And I felt he was very kind because I was totally butchering the beautiful language of Italian. But it was an interesting, blessed moment because his dad was one of the construction workers that built the shrine. And he was a doctor himself and was overseeing a lot of the healthcare system in Italy, so a massive, massive job. But he grew up in a devout Catholic family, like Bartolo did. But his family was very proud because they had a relic of Bartolo Longo. They had some of his hair. And they had a big relic. And he said that Bartolo Longo's holiness must have been real. Well, first of all, because he was a layman. And the local townspeople regarded him as a saint before he died, to the extent that his family had a relic that I believe it was his dad. His dad had collected before Bartolo Longo died. But he made a point that I think was really interesting, because when Bartolo Longo first went to Pompeii, we'll get the backstory, but this is just an introduction.
Yeah.
Okay. So when he went to Pompeii, he saw the spiritual poverty of the people. Now, Pompeii was slightly considered a cursed place. Do we know why?
The volcano.
The volcano erupted a couple thousand years ago, and it's now an archaeological site. So it just totally covered the whole city. And so people that went to Pompeii maybe were looking for a fresh start after prison time or things like that. And so he saw the spiritual poverty there, and Our Lady spoke to him. And he dropped to his knees, and he realized that this was God's plan. That he would bring the rosary and prayer and charitable works and build a shrine for Our Lady there. And so he did. And the gentleman that was speaking to us on our first night there in Pompeii wanted to make this point, and I think it's a very valid and fair point. He said, the greatest testimony to the sanctity of Bartolo Longo is that the local people of Pompeii still go to church and still pray the rosary, which is pretty impressive. We were there for the anniversary, the 150th anniversary of the shrine. And it was very beautiful to see early in the morning. We're like, okay, we're getting there at 6:20 in the morning. No, the church was already full. People were praying. They prayed until 1:30 in the morning, nonstop. The Italians kept coming, the local people, rosary mass, psalms, devotions, and it was very edifying. But that gentleman was right. The greatest testimony of the sanctity of Bartolo Longo is that the people of Pompeii still pray the rosary, and they still go to mass. So let's try to get to know a little bit about this saint. He was born on February 10th of 1841 in Latiano, devout Catholic family.
Oh, when was he born?
1841. 1841. And his family would pray the rosary. And if you go to the churches of his youth, and then you go to the shrine, or go to the shrine and then go to his churches of his youth, you will see how he was formed by the churches of his youth. The colors, the devotions, the saints involved, they must have made a big impact on him because they reappear in the shrine. You know, you'll see those motifs and those devotions. Tragedy hit the family. His dad died when he was young. And that was a significant shock and a huge challenge for any family. His mom did remarry, and she remarried a lawyer. And, you know, the stepdad thing, that's not an easy family dynamic, you know, for anybody. And, but so Bartolo Longo has interest in music, and he has interest in other things, but he's basically told, you know, if you want your education paid for, I think his two options were a doctor or a lawyer. And so he goes, I think his brother became a doctor, if I remember correctly. But he goes and he enters law school. And there's kind of some interesting stories about this time, and, you know, I'm not 100% sure exactly how it all goes together. But at some point he really wanted a piano. I read this just today, Bill sent the article. And apparently his family figured that if he has a piano, he's not going to do his studies. You know, so they basically told him, no, we're not going to provide a piano for you. You need to do your law school studies. And so he apparently made the decision that he was going to eat potatoes for a year to save enough money to buy a piano and a flute. And he did. So this is not your normal, he's got a certain level of willpower and determination. But there is something going on in Italy at this time, and there is a lot of change in the air. There's a lot of political talk of a unified Italy, changing of governments, belief systems. A lot of the ideology of the French Revolution had kind of moved into Italy very strongly. And remember, spiritually speaking, like religion, when we talk about the French Revolution, they're going to do very bizarre things like desecrate the altar of Notre Dame with an occult to some sex goddess practice. I mean, it was a very exploratory, rebellious, spiritual time. And so in Naples, which is a little bit prone to the dark side, spiritualism was very popular among the students. Masonry was a big part of the experience. And so he went to a seance. He went to a satanic seance and seemed to have really connected with it somehow. We don't know exactly the story there or what happened. We're not exactly sure, but he kept going to them. He kept going to the seances and got involved in spiritualism, and eventually became a satanic priest. And we don't need to know the details of all of that, but there's a lot of dark things that happen in the process of moving in that direction. And so he becomes partially possessed. And he is struggling with these demonic attacks and the internal struggle of being partially possessed. And he starts struggling with depression, anxiety. He starts deteriorating. And as he's continuing his law studies, he's continuing his entry into this kind of spiritual experiment that's not going well for him. And one of his professors sees the physical downfall, you know, and the professor is a devout Catholic and reaches out to the young man and basically says, you know, what's going on? You know, you weren't like this when you got here. You're kind of a wreck. And there was a Dominican priest there, the campus ministry. And the Dominican priest personally experienced was the power of the Holy Rosary. And so he experienced very powerfully a form of exorcism through the Holy Rosary. And he experienced that the demons do not like Mary. And that he believed that this was the truth. The Catholic faith and the Rosary was the truth. And so he went to one of the seances and raised up his rosary and denounced Satanism and denounced the seance, and he raised the rosary up and he said, this is the truth. You know, this is what we should be doing. And then kind of the long process of his spiritual healing. We can maybe go to the next one and see a little bit more of, this is a picture of the image of Our Lady of Pompeii. It's St. Catherine of Siena, St. Dominic receiving the rosary. This is the restored image. So Bartolo Longo has a long period of healing, of deliverance. He starts getting involved in charitable works there in Naples. And he meets a lady who is a widow, and she's a countess. And she's very interested in helping with the spiritual works of mercy and the corporal works of mercy. Prayer groups, and then charitable feeding of the poor, and those different types of things. And her husband had died, and she was from a noble family to begin with, and her husband left her with this massive estate on top of her noble background. And so Bartolo Longo, though, is eventually working as a lawyer and kind of not exactly living the nobility lifestyle. But he feels that call to go to Pompeii, and he gets this image of Our Lady, and it was not in this condition. It was like it needed to be restored. It was an image of Our Lady that was kind of messed up. And he humbly kind of went to Pompeii with this as the image, and it was eventually restored. I don't want to get too far ahead of it, so but he was eventually restored, and then God started doing all these miracles through the intercession of Our Lady. Miracle after miracle after miracle. Now the local townspeople in Pompeii, one of the charitable works that Bartolo and his friend, the Countess, started was a school for children of parents who are in prison. And when the Archbishop was sharing with us this aspect of his story, he made a really good point. He said there was a mindset at that time period that if you went to jail and had kids, your kids were going to go to jail. And so there was not a whole lot of sympathy, and there was not a lot of help for the kids. And Bartolo Longo really felt that call from Our Lady, right? You know, he saw the spiritual poverty, and he said, "No, this is my path. This is it." And so he starts a school for the children of whose parents are in jail. Now that's a tough thing. I mean, just imagine trying to cope with life and figure out what to do. And the Archbishop of Pompeii was very proud of this historical fact. And apparently Bartolo Longo was very grateful to Almighty God for this, because the very first student that entered the school became a priest. Which, according to the Archbishop, was very earth-shaking to a lot of the people, because they just ripped these people off. Like, these kids were unreformable because their parents were criminals. And so they are kind of destined to become criminals, whereas Bartolo Longo didn't believe that. I mean, he himself had gone through some pretty dark times and knew the power of prayer and Our Lady and the Rosary to deliver him. And so they educated the youth there in the prison. And so this is the restored image of Our Lady of Pompeii, the image of Our Lady of Pompeii. But it's not the original he brought. The original he brought, providentially, was in serious need of repair. we can probably move to the next one. So this is just kind of some dates to give us a better sense of the chronological progression of his life. February 10th, they mentioned his birth. 1864, his law degree from the University of Naples. So 1864 is his law degree. 1871, he becomes a third order Dominican. So that's when he's experiencing the deliverance, the healing, but that's, a little bit before. So we're talking 4 to 6 or 7 years of kind of trying to become free, and then living the spirituality of the rosary, living the sacramental life, eventually returning back to receiving communion. And but he becomes a third order Dominican, takes the name Brother Rosary, the Brother Rosary. So he's definitely ending his occult activities decisively at this time. He arrives in the Valley of Pompeii to handle affairs for the Countess Maria de Fusco. So he's a lawyer, and he's working as a lawyer. One of his friends is the Countess, and they're doing these charitable works of mercy for her, and he's handled some legal affairs dealing with some property. Shocked by the spiritual poverty, superstition mixed with ignorance, he hears the inner voice echoing Mary's promise to St. Dominic, whoever spreads the rosary will be saved. He falls to his knees and commits his life to this mission. So this is the vocational call, as it were, of Bartolo Longo. 1872. 1873, he founds a rosary confraternity and begins restoring a dilapidated church. It sounds like St. Francis. Yeah. It's a physical church that needs restoration. It was a physical image of Our Lady that needed restoration. He receives the famous painting of Our Lady of the Rosary with St. Dominic Catholic, restores it, and places it in the church. And here we have the beginning of the shrine. So you can see how really God did the shrine. But if you go to the shrine, there are hallways of votives. Thanksgivings, recognizing a miracle, there's a bunch of crutches, there's all sorts of different casts, there's all sorts of different things. And to this day, there are many miracles that the local people give thanks to God for. Through the intercession of prayer, Our Lady. So 1876, so now we're starting to move pretty quickly. The period out of Satanism took years and years and years, and then now things are starting to really gain ground. The cornerstone of the new sanctuary in 1876. Of course, miracles help with that. It's easier to find donors when miracles are happening. Now, this is an interesting moment in his life. The Countess and him are friends. And he has made a vow of virginity. So he has made a private vow received by his spiritual director, and he is basically going to live as a layman, consecrated to the Lord, as a lawyer, and then also establishing these prayer groups and doing the charitable works. She is a widow. I think she had 5 sons, if I remember correctly. And she met him in Naples. And they are working very closely together. She wants to start orphanages. She wants to start soup kitchens. She wants to start schools. She's really excited about the sanctuary. All these things are happening. She has land. She has all these things. And what do you think the local people start saying?
Yeah.
It's an inappropriate relationship. They're living a double life. And so the Pope was very supportive of this. And it got to the point in ecclesial gossip circles that they went to the Pope and said, these are all the ministries we're doing. These are all of the orphanages and schools and soup kitchens and prayer groups and the sanctuary. And we've been doing these things. He's consecrated to the Lord, and she's basically consecrated to the Lord after her marriage. And there's these rumors and these challenges, and the Pope said, well, you need to get married.
The Pope said what?
The Pope said they need to get married.
Yeah.
And so both the Countess and Bartolo married what's called a Josephite marriage, because he had made a vow of celibacy. And he felt like he was not allowed to break that. And so the Pope said, okay, I will give you permission for what we call a Josephite marriage. So they were married in the church and they were legally married, but they lived in separate bedrooms. And they honored each other's commitment to the Lord in that way. And so Leo XIII was excited about this, and they continued to expand their charitable works. In 1891, there is a church consecrated. 1901, the sanctuary is elevated to a papal basilica by Leo XIII. He's very excited about things that are happening in Pompeii. There's always struggles, right? I mean, no matter what you do, there's going to be challenges, and there's going to be adversity, and there's going to be crosses. It's just a part of life. Anybody who is afraid of suffering is going to be afraid of living. It's not easy. And so, as you can imagine, the new rumors were about finances, and he wasn't managing the sanctuary correctly, and he wasn't doing this, and all these different things. And so all these accusations were being leveled against Bartolo. And so he basically goes back to the Pope and be like, okay, last time it was gossip about our relationship and you canceled us to get married. Now it's about the management of the shrine, the money, all these things. And basically the decision was that he would donate everything to the Vatican. And so that was kind of the way they handled that. So he donates the whole shrine, and to this day it's considered extraterritorial Vatican property. So they recognize the donation, and it becomes a papal Vatican shrine. So in 1906, he donates the entire shrine and works to the Holy See, so the Pope. In October 5th of 1921, he does die at the age of 85. His last words simply expressing a lovely desire to see Our Lady. Like the Fatima children, right? So this is not too many years after the apparition of Fatima. Fatima, 1917. He dies in 1925. A couple of the Fatima children had died by now, and they had kept talking about how beautiful Our Lady was. The only thing they wanted to do was to go back to heaven to see Our Lady. And so I imagine that made a big impact on him with the activities of Fatima. He's beatified by John Paul II in 1980, so very early in the pontificate of John Paul II. Very early. And then he's not canonized until October 19th of 2025 by Pope Leo XIV. What's really interesting is that when the Vatican speaks about his life, they are not transparent. They just say in his college years or university days he went astray. That's where they leave it. They don't talk about spiritualism, seances, demonic oppression, satanic priests. They just say he went astray. And there might be some wisdom to that, but I also think the Vatican for many years was very uncomfortable with him. And they're like, oh boy, he's a layman, he's in a Josephite marriage, and he was possessed by demons. Like this is not the guy we want, but it was the guy Our Lady wanted.
Yeah.
And that's what's more important. So we can go to the next slide here. This is the picture of a little bit older Bartolo Longo. It's written in Italian here, so Fondatore della Pompeii Sanctuary. Okay, yeah. From 1841, he was born, he died in 1926, is what this says, actually. So this is a picture of Bartolo Longo in his later years. Okay, we can move to the next one. Now this is Bartolo Longo at 22 years old, so this is when things are getting pretty intense. Spiritually, he's straying away from the church, involved in, he just looks different. He looks angry, you know, there's a lot going on. And, you don't want to, I mean, one picture can't tell everything, you know, but it's definitely a different look.
It's the mustache.
It's the mustache. But I mean, you know, this is Bartolo Longo in his early years. But fast forward a few years and he's doing amazing charitable works. So we can go to the next one. This is the image at his canonization. So this is St. Peter's Basilica. And that is Bartolo Longo's official image for his canonization. Some interesting facts about his life, kind of in a weird way. Supposedly, he was ordained a Satanic priest on the feast of October 7th. Or on the day of October 7th of 1871. What is that day? Day of the Rosary. You know, and it's just kind of like one of those historical coincidences where it's like God saying, okay, you have free will. You're obviously not using it well, but Mary's got her hand on you. You know, so it is the Feast of the Lady of our Rosary. And by the grace of God, his health deteriorates significantly, you know, as he goes into that. In all honesty, some people it doesn't. But for him, there was that grace where his health deteriorated pretty significantly. Here's a part of a prayer that is written by Bartolo Longo, so we can spend a little bit of time with some of his quotes, quotes of him. This is called the prayer called the Supplication to the Queen of the Holy Rosary. O august Queen of victories, O sovereign of heaven and earth, at whose name the heavens rejoice and hell trembles. O glorious Queen of the Rosary, we, your devout children, assembled in your temple of Pompeii, pour out the affections of our hearts. O blessed Rosary of Mary, sweet chain which unites us to God, bond of love which unites us to the angels, tower of salvation against the assaults of hell. You will be our comfort in the hour of our death, and the last word from our lips will be your sweet name, O Queen of the Rosary of Pompeii. In Bartolo Longo's spirituality and writing, you'll see that imagery of chain, like the rosary as some form of chain, but in a good way, because it binds him to Our Lady, he binds him, obviously more importantly, to Christ. But I think, this is just my own speculation, is that he had felt chains binding him to demons. He had felt that spiritual oppression of slavery. Slavery to sin, slavery to the demonic world. And so I think he appreciated chains that binded him to Our Lady, and to our Lord. The Countess's name is Mariana Fornerano de Fusco. But Mariana. So just a little bit about their marriage. They had a long friendship beforehand, focused on their prayer groups, and the local townspeople in the home village are very open about Mariana being a wonderful lady, dedicated to the Lord and the charitable works, but very difficult to get along with. they jokingly talk about Bartolo Longo's suffering by being married to her and not really experiencing a whole lot of consolation in the marriage. When he married her, it put him in a tough situation with her sons, because now he was a stepdad. And as you can imagine, even if you're trying to follow the Lord, that is hard. That's hard for the kids, and it's hard for the family. And so even though we're talking about a saint, we have to remember the basic human dynamics of, this basically marriage to avoid scandal, and the outflowing of that, of being a father-type figure in a stepfather role. And from what I understand, not all the boys were very happy with the inheritance of their family and their father's money being used by their mom for these charitable works. So let's just imagine, I'm not saying this is the case, but this is just speculation. There's uncles involved. They talk to their nephews, and they're like, do you really want your dad's money to go to all this? Like, don't you guys think you should get more of it? And so they try to get it. They try to get it. And that's a part of the process of it becoming a Vatican property. But there was real struggle. And yet in the midst of that, their marriage did become a beautiful example of chaste Marian love and friendship in the Lord. They lived as spiritual siblings and co-workers, united in prayer, with the rosary and their charitable works, just like when they were not married. It, in a certain sense, deepened their shared vocation to holiness and allowed them to model spiritual parenthood for many orphans and the poor that they served. Now that they were freed from rumors, they actually intensified their charitable works and efforts. So their marriage was very fruitful. They built more institutions, promoted the rosary, and started the 15 Saturday devotions. So this is a big part of the spiritual patrimony of Bartolo Longo for the Church, and these are the writings that John Paul used in his document on the Holy Rosary. And it is Bartolo Longo's meditations that helps inspire John Paul to start the Luminous Mysteries. So Bartolo Longo is really the spiritual motivation behind John Paul II starting the Luminous Mysteries. And so he writes this devotional work on 15 Saturdays. There's spiritual readings. He's definitely a mystic. He has a profound understanding of Mary, of the Lord, of the life of grace, the life of holiness, and he provides meditations for 15 Saturdays. And you pray the rosary, you do the meditations, and you go to Holy Mass. And for Bartolo Longo, there is a clear and beautiful and powerful and glorious, intimate connection between the Annunciation and the Eucharist. And the Eucharist. Their marriage did provide a certain level of support and peace in the struggles that they experienced. It provided stability, as we know, legitimacy to their mission, and it helped them expand the work that the Lord was inviting them to do. They found joy in the total dedication to Our Lady of Pompeii, the promotion of Holy Mass, devotion and adoration to the Blessed Sacrament, and living their life in chaste love, living a life of prayer and service. As we know, in 1906, they donated the entire shrine and all of their works to the Holy See, relinquishing any personal control, a final act of detachment, and trust in God's providence. The Josephite marriage between Bartolo Longo and the Countess, that's kind of, everybody calls her the Countess. So, okay. Is now seen as a shining model for lay spirituality, which I think is very important. It's very important. It demonstrates that married love can be fully ordained and ordered to God, to the love of neighbor, the devotion of prayer, and the corporal and spiritual works of mercy of the church. As St. John Paul II himself highlighted their collaboration as exemplary examples of the married life dedicated to charitable works of mercy. Just a little bit about the Countess Mariana Farnerano de Fusco Longo. She lived in from 1836 to 1924. She was a pivotal figure in the life of the apostolate of St. Bartolo Longo. She served as his close collaborator, as we know, for many years before becoming the wife of him in a chaste Josephite marriage. She is a noble woman. She belonged to the Italian noble class. She was the Countess of Fusco, which I know nothing about, but that's the seat of the nobility of the family, is Fusco. There's limited access publicly to like the exact details of the children. Some of what I'm saying I heard while I was in Pompeii, just kind of like from the nun giving the tour, from the Archbishop speaking to us, from one of the local priests talking about it. You know, so I'm not 100% sure in all the details. I wasn't so successful in finding confirmation of some of that stuff online, but I figure if they can say it, I can pass on what they said. She was described as pious and devout, generous and practical, humble and dedicated, and resilient in her collaboration. She was never going to give up, which those are very noble personal traits. The religious sister who gave us a tour of their home in Laziano, the family home of Bartolo Longo, she emphasized over and over again that she had all of these wonderful virtues, but she was very hard to get along. So that's all I really kept hearing over and over again. So I really don't have a whole lot on that. But we know that she must have had a profound love, because she had, I heard, 5 of her own children. And that was kind of like the story we were told, is that she had 5 of her own children, and plus she really helped a lot of orphans. And she apparently is one of the big reasons why they started the home for children of prisoners. So this woman is a woman who has struggled, but a woman who has incredible compassion and great inspiration and encouragement. She internalizes the devotion to the Rosary, and she becomes a woman dedicated to the spreading of the Rosary as well. So it is true Bartolo Longo really felt that, and he's the one most known for it, but she too would spread the devotion of the Rosary, and when they developed the 15 Saturdays devotion, she would try to spread that devotion as well. Okay, yeah, this I think is actually a little bit better. So the Countess Mariana she was more than a wealthy patron. She was a wife, dedicated to spiritual renewal of Pompeii and the spread of the devotion to the Rosary, and a clear understanding of discipleship of our Lord Jesus Christ in a very confused and poor Italy. How many of you know Maria Goretti? So her life is happening at this time, not too far away. And remember the story of Maria Goretti. Her family was so poor that there were multiple families renting an apartment together after her dad died. So there seems to be a lot of death. Bartolo Longo's dad died. His wife's first husband died. There's a lot of death of the male, and that does bring a certain level of hardship to rich families and absolute poverty to poor families. And there's a lot of destitute situations in Italy at this time. And so it's in that context that he and his wife really build a sanctuary. I would say that to this day, we asked the Archbishop what he was most proud of being the Archbishop of Pompeii. And he actually has a really beautiful story. I'll go ahead and tell it. We were American pilgrims. He knew we were coming, and he received us into his office without an appointment. And he took us up to a classroom, and he rearranged the schedule. He spoke to us very generously for about an hour, just trying to tell us some stories about Bartolo Longo. And one of the pilgrims asked, what gives you the most satisfaction as the Archbishop of the Shrine, And he said, it's the charitable works that continue. He said, we have been able to continue the charitable works of Bartolo Longo. And so he really sees that this legacy is real, and then he was a very humble and loving man, and he just a good soul, and he has a great affection for Americans because he had cancer, and he was in Houston at the cancer treatment center there, and he needed a bone marrow transplant. And he got the bone marrow transplant, but there's a seminary in Houston, and he said the seminarians used to go and donate blood for him. And so he says he's kind of got American blood in him. But he said he always has felt a deep connection to people from the United States when they come to the shrine. And so he was making time for us and wanted us to hear stories of the life of Bartolo Longo and the Countess. So at this point, I just would like to focus on John Paul's use of Bartolo Longo. John Paul had a profound admiration of Bartolo Longo. In his 2002 apostolic letter, The Rosary of the Blessed Virgin Mary, he quotes him extensively, drawing on his insights which lead to the luminous mysteries or the mysteries of light, which Bartolo Longo's contemplative approach and mysticism helped pave the way for a deeper understanding of meditating on the life of Christ in the context of the Rosary, beyond the joyful, sorrowful, and glorious mysteries. John Paul II said, "Rosary in hand, Blessed Bartolo Longo says that each of us awaken your confidence, says to each of us, awaken your confidence in the Most Blessed Virgin Mary, the Rosary, the Venerable Holy Mother. In you I rest all my troubles, all my trust, and all my hope." John Paul II visited the shrine, as you can imagine, praised Bartolo's blend of prayer and charitable works, and other popes have echoed this type of gestures. Leo XIII supported the shrine, as we said. Later popes recognized its importance. Pope Francis was able to advance his canonization, and Pope Leo, as we know, presided over it. Padre Pio had a strong connection to Our Lady of Pompeii. And he went on pilgrimage there multiple times in his boyhood. So isn't that neat that a part of Padre Pio's boyhood stories were multiple pilgrimages to the shrine, this miraculous shrine that was being built and developing in Pompeii. 1901 was one of the years. He actually did military service, at least in part, in Naples, and at that time apparently was able to get to the shrine as well. On his deathbed, Padre Pio sent a rose to the shrine. Now, the Archbishop confirmed this for us, because some of the stories you hear, you're like, but the Archbishop confirmed this for us. The rose remained fresh. It didn't deteriorate. And this, they feel, was God just allowing us at the shrine to be aware of his Padre Pio's love for Our Lady. In the spirituality of Bartolo Longo, we might, let me use Carlo Acutis. Carlo Acutis basically says, if you're in the sunshine, you're going to get tan. If you're in the presence of the Blessed Sacrament, you're going to get holy. Right? So that was kind of like the simple part of the spirituality of Carlo Acutis. This is a good quote about Bartolo Longo, prayer, the rosary, and the connection with Our Lady, and meditating on the life of Jesus. He says, just as two friends frequently in each other's company tend to develop similar habits, so too, by holding familiar conversation with Jesus and the Blessed Virgin, by meditating on the mysteries of the Rosary, and by living the same life in Holy Communion, we can become, to the extent of our lowliness, similar to them, and can learn from these supreme models a life of humility, poverty, hiddenness, patience, and perfection. So the more we kind of talk to Jesus from our heart, share with them, meditate on the rosaries, try to imitate the life of Christ we read in the Scriptures, we will become, by God's grace, able to become more and more like Jesus and Mary. So we can move forward to another. This is an icon written by Dr. Lynn Bissonette. And that's how we ended up going to Pompeii. She sent a copy of it to the shrine. I think they asked, I don't know how that happened actually. But there was a really good copy of it sent to the shrine. The Archbishop really liked it, and he put it in one of the chapels, and then invited her to come for the 150th anniversary. So that's how the pilgrimage got formed. And so when we went there, it was really special, right, to go to the chapel to see her, a very good reproduction of her icon of Bartolo there. And you might notice that he's wearing the cape of the Knights and Dames of the Holy Sepulchre of Jerusalem. Before he died, the Pope gave him this honor. At that time, it was more of like the Pope and some of his friends inviting people to join the Knights and Dames of the Holy Sepulchre of Jerusalem. In the church world at that time, it was basically the Pope saying, he has our full support. The highest levels of confidence and full support, we make him a Knight of the Holy Sepulchre of Jerusalem, and it's my understanding that he was buried in that. And so we can move on from there. This is the shrine. Yeah, pretty impressive, huh? So the guy that I spoke to is a medical doctor, but his dad helped build that.
Oh, wow.
And they were so proud of that relic that his dad collected while Bartolo Longo was alive, knowing that he was a saint. Which is, like I said at the beginning, remarkable. Mother Teresa we can understand. But Bartolo Longo, the local townspeople were totally convinced
Pompeii?
This is Pompeii.
Is it outside, it's out, clearly outside of the ruins, is it?
Exactly. If I understand correctly, the land that the Countess owned, some of it are the ruins.
Okay.
Yeah, so there's a little bit of income, that's helpful, I imagine, with all that. But Bartolo Longo supported and encouraged the excavations. He was a lawyer. He's interested in academic stuff and felt it was very good culturally. And so he was a big supporter of the excavations of Pompeii.
I lived in Naples for 3 years, been to Pompeii numerous times, never seen this, and now I regret it.
Well, maybe the Lord will bring you back. But you could definitely go to Pompeii. You could walk to the excavations from here.
Okay.
In fact, we did. Yeah. And so this is a big bell tower, and it's a beautiful shrine. So we can go to the next one. This is the upper section of the sanctuary. So here's the image of Our Lady of Pompeii. And wow, what beautiful art. He really had a particular mindset. His mindset was, I am doing this for God, but in a very special way for Our Lady. And so I want the best. And so they would save until they had enough to get what they wanted. And they had great local artisans and craftsmen, and they promoted obviously art and architecture and beauty and catechesis, the stories of Scripture, the stories of the saints. It's a Bible in Basilica. And just kind of a fun historical note, the first organist had gone blind at the age of 12. But he was a renowned organist. But I just feel like that was kind of fitting. The image was in need of restoration. The church was in need of restoration, and the famous organist was blind. It was like perfect. It was perfect. It was perfect. Yeah, we were there for the 150th anniversary all day long, singing and praying, and people coming to venerate the image. I was like, is this happening in Italy? Wow. Yeah, the greatest testimony of the sanctity of Bartolo Longo is the local people still pray the rosary. So we can go to the next one here. This would be an example of his quarters. It is a single bed. They lived in separate bedrooms. And pretty simple. But, there's a kneeler, but there's not a whole lot. There's definitely religious images. That's the image of Our Lady of Pompeii. That's the Holy Face of Jesus, the Sacred Heart of Jesus. The churches that he grew up as a child had big artwork for the Sacred Heart of Jesus. That one's Our Lady of Sorrows, and that one looks like an old crucifixion scene. So very simple. His slippers are very worn. Yeah. Yes. So we can move on to the next one. Okay, this is probably the delight, as you can imagine, of his heart. Now, this is here with some of the orphan boys, and that just is that photo is worth more than any talk. It just says it all. Just his face, and everybody's kind of huddled in, gathered around, and those are his children. The spiritual children of Bartolo Longo. I'm kind of fond of this little one peeking up, But you can see the different personalities of the kids. It's a great photo. It's a great photo. But if you'll see that they kind of have his arm, they're kind of holding on to him.
That time frame encompasses rerunning of art. Is part of the social doctrine.
Yes, that's actually an excellent point.
That would have been known to him as well.
Leo the 13th?
Right.
Yes, exactly. You know, that is worth mentioning. Thank you for mentioning that.
Just repeat that.
Pope Leo the 13th wrote Rerum Novarum, which was his promotion of trying to remind the church that we have to do charitable works. We have to live the gospel. We have to work for social justice for the poor. Remember, Italy is in a massive moment of change. There is poverty at the extreme levels. And then you have the wealthy nobility. You have people losing their children, like Maria Goretti's mom, after her murder, because she was taking care of her siblings, and the mom had to go work in the fields, so no one was there to care for the kids, so they adopted out her other kids. Right? This was like in Connecticut in 1882, when the Irish immigrants were there and the founding of the Knights of Columbus. Right? So the Irish immigrant would die like around the age of 35, a male, and if the wife couldn't afford housing, they would take the kids. And so that's how the Knights of Columbus got started. And so this was not only in Italy, it was in the United States. There was significant poverty in these social changes and upheavals. And so the Pope writes a document asking the church to get to it. You know, let's help. Let's do what we're supposed to be doing. And so I think he really looked to Bartolo Longo and his wife as an example of what the nobility could be doing, or what others could be doing, and in bringing about social justice. Yeah, very good point. Yeah, that was very dear, very big for Leo XIII.
Well, and the dignity of every human.
Yeah, exactly.
I mean,
Yeah, the dignity of the fundamental Christian belief that everybody's good, even if their parents are in jail. You know, everybody's good. And with God's grace, with patience, love, a lot of people can improve. And Bartolo Longo knew that. Like, I mean, he's like the perfect saint for this, you know, because like he was, you know, he was in the dark side. God bless him. Okay, we can move to. I think there's some. Okay, so that's the Countess. You know, that's Bartolo Longo and the Countess. And she's dressed very simply. I mean, for a noble woman, that's very simple. It's a simple black dress with a brooch and, you know, chain. It's very simple. Okay, we can. And here they are older. Probably not too long before his death. Yeah, he seems to have like these red sores on his face. Maybe he fell or something like that. Bruised. I don't know. I'm speculating, but yeah, this is just 4 years I think before his death. I think I got the dates mixed up between the two of their deaths. I think Bartolo was in 24 and she was in 26. I think that's more correct. So, you know, they're in their 80s. I think she's older than him. I think she's older than him.
So one of your things said 5 years older.
Okay, yeah, she's definitely older than him. So let's say he's 82 at this time, I think. So she's 87. Like I said, I'm not 100% sure on those dates. Okay. All right, here we go. Would somebody be so kind as to read this so you don't have to hear my voice?
Sure.
Okay, thank you.
Okay. From the first Saturday meditation, Annunciation, love for the Incarnation and humility. My soul, do you understand what this means? The Word is made man? Oh, the endless goodness and mercy of the Lord. This God thus loved you so much as to wish his only begotten Son to humble himself, taking the form of a servant, to offer himself in sacrifice every day on the altars and be with you always, giving himself as food in the Holy Eucharist. O great Mother of God, immense sea of graces and of blessings. O Mother of Mercy, let Jesus reign in my heart. Let him reign in it as King. Now I can't see all of it.
As it.
Absolute Master, so that I may draw life from his life and be consummated in him, to live of him and with him unto eternity.
Simple and beautiful.
Beautiful.
Yeah, simple and beautiful. What a lovely spirituality. You know, a great quote there. Meditations of the Annunciations. This is what John Paul read. You know, this is from the work that John Paul had read, or quoted from during his work. Another quote from the work. Would somebody else like to read that?
I will.
Okay, thank you, Bill.
On the Incarnation and Eucharist, the first Saturday Annunciation. This God thus loved you so much as to wish his only begotten Son to humble himself, taking the form of a servant, to offer himself in sacrifice every day on the altars and be with you always, giving himself
At that point, it's the same quote. Sorry. I should have only copied the first part. So this God thus loved you so much as to wish his only begotten Son to humble himself, taking the form of a servant. So then that was the quote before. So what I was hoping to do, which I didn't do, is this is for Bartolo Longo the reason for all of this. Jesus offers himself on the altars. He offers himself to you as food. He can reign in your heart. He can reign in your heart as King. He's the absolute master. He can unite himself to you because he loves you. Right? So it's very simple. This is St. John at work. St. John, the spirituality of St. John the Evangelist. And a nice blending of biblical and spirituality. Okay, I think there's one more if I remember correctly. I wanted to highlight this one more time because this does show that dynamic of friendship and how for Bartolo Longo it is a real relationship with God. It's a real friendship. Like Father earlier today talked about intimacy. You know, having this intimacy with the Lord, who is Jesus for you, and coming into this intimacy. And Bartolo Longo has this profound sense that when he's praying the rosary and sharing his heart with Jesus and Our Lady, it is a real relationship. And when he's reading the scripture, there's something very real there. And when he's trying to live the virtues, he's still in relationship with them. And he is acquiring the virtues of Jesus and Our Lady through friendship. He is a friend of Jesus, and he's a friend of Mary. And just as two friends sometimes influence the behavior of each other, so he is learning through the friendship he has with Jesus and the friendship he's experiencing in his soul with Our Lady, he's becoming like them. Profound and simple. So maybe somebody could really, I read it earlier in the talk, but this is really a beautiful part of his spirituality.
Just as two friends, frequently in each other's company, tend to develop similar habits, so too, by holding familiar converse with Jesus and the Blessed Virgin, by meditating on the mysteries of the Rosary and by living the same life in Holy Communion, we can become, to the extent of our loneliness, similar to them.
You want to just see if there's another one or not?
No.
That's it. Okay. Everyone's relieved. On my verbal text, I do have some more, but I think that's pretty good. Time, I think, will allow us to conclude. And so this is kind of a general introduction of a saint that I'm getting to know, and a very recent saint of the church, and a very engaging story. I would encourage what he would encourage, which was the rosary. And if you're interested, it's called the 15 Saturdays. A wonderful devotion of spiritual reading, praying the rosary, going to Mass, and then doing the reading of his writings and devotions for 15 Saturdays in a row. And you can buy a book on that and stuff like that. Yeah, so I did have a little prayer here at the end. Let's do that. In closing, let us take to heart St. Bartolo's words and example. Let us pick up our rosary, trust in Mary's intercession, spread this devotion which if you spread, you will be saved. May St. Bartolo Longo, Apostle of the Holy Rosary, pray for us, that we too may journey from whatever darkness we might face in our lives or struggles or challenges to the light of Christ and experience the efficacy of Mary's love and intercession, a real friendship with Jesus and Mary. Our Lady of Pompeii,
Pray for us.
St. Bartolo Longo.
Pray for us.
Okay, well, thank you for listening, and
That was really interesting.
appreciate you kind of going on that journey with me with the same time, just getting to know.
Father, what would be a good way to use devotion to him today here in Portland, in Beaverton, with all of the satanic